Sure, how many people here for the 11 o'clock talk? The security auditor. There'll be a slight overlap between the two talks because there is an overlap between security audits and what I talked about here, which is called your security assessments or security risk assessments. But there are some differences. Well, the big thing was for about 7 years, I spent as a security consultant doing a lot of security risk assessment for a wide variety of companies. A lot of different frameworks and standards and regulations. Now I've gotten out of that. It's just working for one company dealing with high trust software. I thought I'd do a disclaimer as I start doing this. So, the views expressed by me are my views. They not, they not match with or reflect the views of my employers, current or past, or BSides Tampa, or any organization part of yada yada yada. So your mileage may vary. This is the topics I'm going to talk about. As I said, I spent several years as a security consultant. I did a lot of security risk assessment, gap assessments for a wide range of companies of various sizes and industries. Just to give you an idea what I mean by that, smallest company I dealt with was a one doctor psychology office. The biggest was probably some of these large regional hospital concerns that meant I had to work with a team of people, assessing them over a couple of weeks, driving around, visiting offices, doing a lot of interviews, and so on and so forth, walking around their campuses. See, some of the companies I've dealt with some software companies, manufacturing companies, a theater chain, a publisher, and sorry that I don't mention any names, but when I worked as a consultant, we did not name our clients, and so I'm also leery about doing so. But if I name some of my clients, oh yeah, I know them. Also, a certain entertainment conglomerate that's in the greater Tampa Bay area. In that, I did a lot of different things. I did HIPAA, PCI, Cybersecurity Framework, 27001, Critical Security Controls, New York DFS. If you've ever heard of that? SOC 1, SOC 2, High Trust. Blah, 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 blah. Part of this, for a lot of my clients, I encourage them to create what I call an audit framework, basically a structure for gathering their evidence ongoing. So when they can't be, when we came in to assess them or they got audited, that they actually had the evidence to show this. Yes, we're doing what we say we're doing. Here's the evidence. This will be actually the topic of a future presentation, what I'm loosely calling part 2. I'm not sure where that'll be given or when, hopefully this year. So again, this is meant to be a presentation at a very high level, a very simple level. This is probably a topic that, honestly, we would probably spend a whole day on or a week of training on how to be a security assessor. My target audience are basically 2 people. One is those who maybe you might want to do this as a career. You might want to work as a security consultant like I did and go and work with clients and companies and help them be better and assess them, so forth. And also maybe you're going to face someone like me, or, coming into your company and asking you a lot of questions, and you might not understand what that is and what that involves. And you might say, oh, it's the scary auditors. I'm terrified, and try to alleviate that. Because the assessment can be done against a wide range of frameworks, standard regulations, I'm not going to cover any of these. Okay. I'm basically going to do basically, if you will, a generic assessment model that can be used with any of these. I will, at the end of the presentation, give you resources of where you can go and learn about these frameworks and standards. If you're not familiar with them, I honestly, several of these I've actually spoken at conferences, including BSides Tampa. I think my first time talking at BSides Tampa was on the HIPAA regulation, and they filmed it. It's on YouTube. So what is a security risk assessment? Basically an assessment is an appraisal or an evaluation. Come in and see, how are you doing things? Really good, or oh my God, why are you doing this? Why aren't you doing this? And everything in between. And it's basically an evaluation of an organization's security program, what's called an ISMS. That's from 27001. It's an information security management system. And we try to see, hey, how does this compare? How did what are doing compare against whatever we're going to compare it against? Whether it's a regulation, whether it's a standard, whether it's a framework, and what are the risks that you face because you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. And again, we evaluate how well you meet those requirements. It's not just, are you doing it or are you not doing it? It's how well you're doing it. Oh, you're doing backups? Yeah, that's great. No. It's, how are you doing backups? Explain to me how you're doing it backups. Oh, you're doing it daily, weekly, incremental. Are you encrypting them? That's where it gets into the assessment part where we take a look at how you're doing it, and is that really well, or is it, oh my God, are you freaking crazy? And again, that's one of the benefits of having worked with a lot of different companies was there was a wide range of these different companies. There was the bare handful that they were doing everything good, where it was like, gee, can I find anything that I can say you need to improve this? Versus the other side where it was, we already know going in they have no policies. And who knows what else god awful things we'll find, and then the ones in between where, you gave me policies, where's the rest? Oh, there aren't any rest. Okay. I think, which I will kind of, touch on more going on. I want to make clear, security assessments or gas are not audits. There is a difference. Okay. So again, we talk about a security assessment, we're evaluating the ISMS. Again, we're getting a rating of some sort. And that rating could be like a, good to bad, or, a numerical rating. And there's all kinds of different ways that can be done. And there's another type of assessment called a gap assessment. That's just, it's much, much easier. It's quicker. It's basically coming in and saying, finding out what you're doing, what you're not doing. You're doing backups. Okay, great. You've got, antivirus. Great. You got asset management in place. Oh, you don't? Okay, that's a gap. Moving on. So that's the gap assessment is quicker. The thing with an audit is that one, it's an independent evaluation, regardless internal or external. What is or is not in place? I am not independent as an assessor. I am an extension of the company. That's one big difference between an audit and what I do. And that's why sometimes make it very clear when I go talk to people at companies, look, I'm not an auditor. I am here on behalf of your company to find out how you're doing, because they want me to come in and find out what's going on and what's not going on, because we're here to help you and improve you. That's why we're not necessarily independent. We're also aimed at improvement, because oftentimes what happens, because again, I was a consultant assessor, at the end of the assessment, I might say, okay, this is what you need to work on. And sometimes we're like, okay, great, thank you. We'll see you next year. And some are like, okay, what do you do to help us? So then I would start helping them put in place policies and procedures and so on and so forth, which an auditor cannot do. Auditor cannot audit what they implement. Not an auditor, I'm an assessor. I can assess what I implement. So ideally, I should get one of my colleagues to come in and assess what I put in place, or what I put in place with the client. But that's where some of the differences are. Again, what's going to be assessed against all these things, and probably about more. I think, except for like one, I've done every one of these, and that's to be a brag. It's just how it wound up being. I had some clients who were like, "Oh yeah, we're also subject to this regulation. Could you take a look at and us and tell us how we're doing?" type thing. So, why conduct an assessment? Usually, management, typically C-suite or upper management, wants to know how their program is doing. They want to make sure they're in line with whether regulation center or framework, how they're doing, because they want to know, what they can do to get things improved. I actually had some clients that, and these weren't necessarily the C-suite people, those were like the step below, They were bringing us in to assess their program system, knowing full well that they had issues, but upper management was more likely to listen to us and give them money to fix the problems they knew about than they were to listen to them and give them money to fix the problems they knew about. Go figure. You know, as in, you know, we would sit down and think, oh, our problems are this type thing. You don't usually have people come in and just blurt out all their dirty laundry, but that's what you sometimes do. So obviously the purpose is to improve the overall program. We give a full report to the client, several different reports on details, high level, and so forth. One thing we also will do is we will also give them what's called a corrective action plan, i.e. we've looked at what you have in place, what you're missing. We have a good idea of your capabilities. So we've laid out this plan that runs out 6 months, a year, year and a half of prioritized activities you should do to fix what we think you need to be fixed, which really helps them out for a lot of our clients who were like, what do we do first? List of 100 things, and sometimes they want a report they can give to their clients, at least they said like, yes, we've had a third party come in and took a look at us and we're HIPAA compliant, what have you. Some of them are also doing this to prepare because they're going to have auditors or whatever you want to call them come in and audit them and give them a SOC 2 report or certified for 27001 or high trust or what have you. So they want, us to come in, take a look at their program, figure out what needs to be fixed and fix them so this happens. And that's something that I actually did. I helped 2 companies get their first SOC 2, worked with 2 companies to get 27001 certified, worked with 2 companies for high trust certification. So a lot of fun times. Now, one thing, hopefully most of you guys are familiar with this. I'm not going to spend too much time, but this is the big thing of what we're doing when we do assessments is we're doing assessments against what are called controls, in particular IT controls. These are activities done by people and systems. I have to emphasize that because of some people who think that controls are only technical and don't understand that no, controls are people doing things and policies and procedures. And this is something that we take a look at in terms of, do they have policies in place, do they have procedures in place, do they have the controls in place? Let me see the evidence of that. Which is what an auditor would do as well. And this is important to managing risk, and we look at all these sort of things. This design is from ISACA. There's various versions of this, but this is the one I like the best, which is why we have controls. You have a threat. That is, it creates a threat. It creates a threat event. That event impacts a vulnerability, which causes an impact, a breach maybe, and you have all these different controls to address certain aspects. You have the detective control that just says, oh, that's happened, take care of it. And hopefully the preventive will help things. Keep in mind that if you read the wording, you don't see the word stop or prevent. The controls do not do either. They reduce. You can reduce risk. You cannot eliminate risk. Understand that. So again, we have technical controls, firewalls, encryption, antivirus, and so forth. But we also have non-technical controls where we have policies and procedures, and you need both. If you don't have both, you will fail an audit or an assessment because you have to have them on both. Now, in doing this, of course, we have to gather evidence. That's something I think the last couple of talks have talked about is evidence, because that's how we, whether I'm an assessor, whether I'm an auditor, how do I know the heck that you're doing what you claim you're doing if I don't have evidence? This is a methodology from Douglas Landahl, his book. I'll tell you what that book is later on, and it's called the Riot Method. Review of documents, done a ton of that. Interview key personnel, inspect the controls, observe behavior, test controls. Did A lot of the first two, the last three, I've done hopefully a decent way of doing it. I honestly wish I had the book when I started out in this career as an assessor. I probably would have done a better job, in my opinion. And there's different methods of assessments. So these are a couple that I see a lot, and this is basically where you assess risk against threat and impact. First is very common. It's a 3x3, low, medium, high. You know, is the threat likelihood high? Is the level of impact low? Well, then it's low. Don't have to worry about it too much. But you can also go further where you can do a 5x5 like this, and I've seen 7x7. Of course, you know, the first one I can do pretty decently. That's what it typically did. But, you know, you try to like think about, okay, is this very low, or is it low, or is it moderate? You know, and oftentimes when I'm doing assessments, I'll work with someone else and then we'll go back and forth whether, oh, I think it's low and he thinks it's medium, and, you know, we got to go back and forth to come up with what we're going to pick. So not too much fun. Here's two other different methodologies. This one, the first one here is from the Center for Internet Security for their assessment for security controls. They do 5 elements, and then each one of those, they have 5 points. So policies, whether you have no policies or written, is the control implemented or not? Is the control automated? Is the control reported? And the thing is that these are all then scored, and then that's how they kind of score you on your assessment of having the critical security controls implemented. This one here is from High Trust. Here, for every one of their little control points, they look at, do you have a policy that addresses what they want? Do you have a procedure that addresses what they want? Have you implemented it? And then they score from 0 to 100. And based upon that scoring and the scoring of all the other controls, we'll determine whether or not you pass your certification. So lots of fun. And when I started talking about, you know, thinking about the assessment, there's like, you know, basic stages, but before you should even talk about doing an assessment, if this is what you're doing as a career, you'd have what I kind of jokingly call kind of the pre preparation. Before you even talk about getting ready to work with a client, these are some of the things that you need to get taken care of beforehand. You know, if you're working for a company, you know, the consulting company, whatever, the company would have hopefully done this. The funny thing was the company I was working with was pretty small. So a lot of the stuff that either I had a heavy hand in doing and so forth. And it's saying like, okay, are we going to have a GRC tool to collect that evidence from this client? Or we're going to have a, you know, just a repository for them to upload files. Are we going to use like spreadsheets to do our assessments, to have all the controls that we're doing, all our scoring and whatnot? Do we have what's called a document request list or evidence request list that we give to the client and say, this is what we want from you? I'll talk more about that because that's a very important step. And then, of course, we want to create kind of report templates to make things a lot easier. If I'm going to give, you know, different clients a report, I didn't want to have to create a brand new from scratch report for every different client. I want to have a template that I can take and I can modify and update and give to this client, that client, that client that is, you know, 90% the same structure and whatnot. It's just the data inside is different. You know, otherwise I'm spending a lot of time. And also, you know, the assessment model that I might use, which might be determined by the client, I might have different versions. So I had multiple spreadsheets created. So I had a spreadsheet for, oh, I'm doing a HIPAA assessment. I got a spreadsheet for that. Oh, I'm doing assessment against cybersecurity framework. Got a spreadsheet for that. Oh, we're doing 27001, spreadsheet for that. Again, this is also taken from ISOC. I thought this was a good one. This was like an audit process, you know, step, but this is, again, this is the assessment process the same way. You know, you have your planning phase, you know, planning, getting ready to do the work, what we call the field work or document phase, which is usually, this is more this is kind of the fun part. I think this is the boring part that oftentimes I as an assessor didn't always have involvement with. This is usually my, you know, upper level in the organization with the client, not me. You know, as more the doer. And then the reporting phase, which is where you take everything else, you go to the client and say, this is how you're doing, and so forth. which some of them involved with, some of them I wasn't. So the preparation, the first step, one thing we do is we define what's called the scope and the rules of engagement, which are put down in what's called an SOW, statement of work. Okay, scope. Hopefully you guys know what that is, but just in case, the scope is, what is the scope of the assessment? What are you assessing? Are you assessing the entire company? That might not be a good idea, or are you only assessing a sub part of the company? So that can be important. Might have a huge company, but they're like, okay, we have this division over here that they're working with sensitive data. So, okay, that's just the scope. We're going to look at just that little part. So that's important to define what that scope is. It's also important for the client because, the more I have to, as an assessor, run around and do stuff, the more it's going to cost you. It defines what is being assessed. Why are we assessing it? How are we going to do it? Am I allowed to do uninvited visits? Can I drop by, the client locations unannounced and social engineer my way in? Am I allowed to do that or not? We don't want to go what happened with those assessors that went to that courthouse and by county sheriffs, which did happen. Then I said, if you do a request statement from the client, now we developed what's called a document request list, and this was not just a sheet of paper saying, give us your policies. For us, it developed into a multi-tab spreadsheet. First one was all the documentation and evidence I needed from clients. That was, and it wasn't just give me your policies, it was give me your policy on asset management, give me your policy on antivirus, give me your disaster recovery plan, give me your incident response plan, give me your network diagram, give me a sample of your assets. Your asset data is a screenshot. Give me a screenshot of your password settings, things like that. So I had a whole list I developed over time to give the client, say, this is what I need from you, to be very specific. Then we had another one, which was, who are the key people in your company? Who's your network engineer? Who's your system administrator? Who builds the servers? Who builds, your desktops? Who does your backups? In some small company, that's going to be like 2 or 3 people. And a big company, there can be individual different people responsible for different activities. That was all important because I'm going to interview these people, so I want to know who the heck I'm going to have to interview. So I went through and kind of break down everything. I would also ask who are all their vendors that they rely upon. I mean, their data, you have data centers that you have, that's your vendors. You have cloud, things like that. I had one tab that was all the security tools. What's your antivirus tool? What's your backup tool? What is your IDS IPS tool? What is your, email filtering tool? And do you have a whitelist, blacklist system, and so on and so forth? So I went through all the possible security tools, tell me what you have in place, right now. All the third-party vendors, all the business associates, just asking for that information oftentimes started showing us there was issues. As in, I'm not sure what we have here, type thing, which, that's right there indicating I got problems that we're going to have to deal with. Once we have that, we also then develop the interview list and the site visit list, because if we're going to go and do interviews, we're going to need to schedule those interviews. Or we can schedule, over a week of time where me and maybe my associates that we're doing back to back interviews with different groups of people over a week, which I have done. We have sites that we need to go visit. In case we need to get a list of all those where those sites and work out a schedule so that I can, so if I'm going to spend a week driving around, visiting sites, which I've done. I think one time I wound up driving across Central Florida, visiting doctor offices from Monday through Friday, which was so much fun. That all has to be worked out, and they need to know that I'm coming and so on and so forth. And then, of course, if we're dealing with like a larger client, like say these, the larger medical center and whatnot, then I'm also, or some of our team members, we're going to be walking around to different departments and areas and this sort of stuff, because you never know what you're going to find, squirrel away in some hallway or mezzanine or what have you, which I have. So you need to kind of be, be prepared for all that sort of stuff. And then we get to the fun stuff, which is what we call the assessment, doing the field work. First off, we take on all that evidence, start reviewing it. We ask for missing documentation. I love when clients number their documents, because the first thing I do, I take all the documents, I throw it in a spreadsheet, and I sort it, and I love when they number, because they go like, okay, you give me document 1, 2, 3, 7, 8. Okay, there's some missing numbers there, guys. What's that? And they're like, oh, sorry, I forgot that. Here you go. Or you go into the documents and they make reference to other documents. That's one thing. That's one of the first things I take a look at is, does the policy procedure document reference some other documents? And they go look at my list. Do I got that one? Yeah, I got that one. Wait a minute. I don't have this one. Now, hey, I saw it mentioned. Oh, yeah, sorry, here you go. I'll talk more about, the things with documents. And of course, we conduct interviews. I prefer having a team, at least 2 people do interviews. That's just me. Because if I'm talking and asking questions, I don't have the time to write them down. I want someone else to write them down while I'm talking, because sometimes they'll say something to me, and I'll spark to me in my mind and this sort of stuff. And if I'm going, okay, that doesn't work. One of my colleagues, he prefers to record them, and then later on he transcribes them. I prefer having 2 of us, and then I'll ask questions and he'll record, or she'll record, and then we'll flip off and that sort of stuff. One thing I try to do is I try to create a list of questions. So for like a network engineer, I'll have some already prepared questions I want to ask that person, and I'm trying to, understand things and so forth. We also use the interviews to capture missing information, missing evidence. If I ask for evidence, how you do this, how do you do that, and they don't give it to me, now to find out, okay, show me how you do this. Let me take some screenshots. And then on-site inspection, that's where we walk around, we look for physical security, we take pictures. I took a lot of pictures. I kind of wish I kept them. I really shouldn't have, and that's why I got rid of them, because I could really show you some really horrible things that I saw at different sites. So let me talk more about documents. So this is something that I look for. I look for the date of last update, review, and approval. I don't expect documents, policies, procedures to be updated every year. I do expect them to be reviewed every year and approved every year. So when I get documents and I look at it, like, this hasn't been approved in 2-3 years. How do I know that this is accurate? That's a big red flag. As I said, I mentioned I'd look for any other documents not received. I read through the policy and procedures, it can be really boring, to make sure that it is hitting what is expected in the regulation, standard framework, or what have you, because they will expect you to have certain things explained. What I'm also looking for is things like, I look for any tools noted in the procedures, and I'm going to bring that up in my interviews. I'm going to see how the document will tell me how things are done. I want to note that, because I'm going to ask the person when I interview them to verify it. And I'm going to look for any other problems, such as, out of date, things don't make sense. Oh, who is this person I'm seeing named in this document? Oh, well, that person hasn't been here for 2 years. That's a problem. So some of the things I've seen in documents, I have literally seen documents where the title said one thing, and I read the document itself and it didn't match up. So I had to dig them for that. I've seen grossly outdated documents, as in, they haven't updated in 2 or 3 years, and they talk about tools they didn't use anymore. Or one talked about a data center in another state that hadn't had for 2 years, when the data center was in the next county over. I think probably the worst is when I will talk to the technical folks and ask them how they do things, and what they're telling me doesn't match the document. And I'm only like, well, that's interesting, because, according to your policy here, it says blah, 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 blah. And I get, oh, I didn't know we had that. So that's sort of the sort of things that I'm looking for. I've also seen where they only had like half the expected document set that they needed. And of course, there were the client, like I said, and from the get-go, and knew they didn't have any policies. So part of what our job was basically figure out how they were doing things, because then we would have to go and create the document policies that matches what they were doing and help them put it into place. So again, this all gets captured in for our final report for the client in terms of like what they're doing good, what they're doing bad. Certainly the fact that they're not reviewing it and approving it on a regular basis, that's a big red flag. Again, not everyone was out there. I mean, we had some clients that were like wonderful. I had one client that came in with a binder of their policies. Here you go, put it in front of me, and every single one had been dated and signed off by the person in charge. And I'm like, wow, this is beautiful. I wish everyone was like that. Other documents, I look at that's other things I ask for, like what's your latest pen test report, what's your latest vulnerability scan, your antivirus scan. What I'm looking for there especially is if there is issues found in the pen test or vulnerability scan, have they addressed it? Oh, you have this pen test. Oh, it's just here you have this kind of critical issue. Have you taken care of this? That's not good. Of course, I'm also hoping they haven't had that problem too. We're like, no, we hadn't had a pen test. We didn't think it was needed. And they have critical data. I'll ask for network diagrams, data flow diagrams. So like with network diagrams, I want to see if it's been set up the way they kind of should be. Do they have it? Is it all a flat network? Is everyone on the same freaking network, including Wi-Fi and system data and this sort of, or have they segregated the network? Data flow diagrams I love, especially if they have data that's moving between different systems that is sensitive data. And by sensitive data, I mean basically PHI or PII. Some people have that, some people don't. And in some cases, I have to like figure out what the data flow is by talking to them. Like, oh, the data comes into this system and then it moves into this system and so on and so forth. I'll look for other evidence, such as do they have an asset inventory? What how many servers you have, how many desktops you have, where they have them, who has them. Do you have backup reports? If the backups have failed, have you used those? What's your password settings? You kind of look for the basic stuff like, please God, have at least 10 characters required passwords, not 6 or 8. And of course, I look for any discrepancies between what they're doing versus what's in the policy. And of course, with all evidence, if there's screenshots, get date and time stamps. And there's an easy way to do it. Easy way. The bottom at the corner of your computer should be a date and time. So when you take the screenshot, just extend it a little bit more and add that in, and then I know when it was the date and time. Yeah, but no, usually people aren't doing that, so that's usually a pretty good. And I had to be, you'd be wondering what are you trying to hide? Interviews again, understanding how things are done, validate what's in the policy procedures. I prefer open-ended questions like, hey, so you're the network engineer. Run through what you do. Let me know. And just kind of let them tell me what they do. I don't want questions that are kind of yes or no questions. I want questions that'll give a response. And I'm kind of like, I'm not trying to trick them anything, but I'm trying to tease out information that, they may give without realizing it. Like, so, so I asked them other things like, hey, have you had security awareness training? We all should have done. Oh, have you done like a incident response exercise? How did that go? Things like that. I validate the tools being used, verify that the procedures in the document are what is being used. Ask them to show me what they do, things that, like sitting, even though somebody's gonna be in a conference room and whatnot, I'd rather somebody just drop by their office and have them show me stuff and let me give me screenshots and so forth. Interviews can be pretty exhausting. Like I said, I've spent with some clients like frequently doing nothing but interviews and whatnot. And then there's the site visits. These are from the internet. Sorry, this is not from me. Take them because it's sort of like kind of close to some of the stuff I've seen. I go and do a walk around at offices and sites. I'm looking for the basic stuff. Are there security cameras? Are there security alarms? Are there locks? Or are they doing stupid stuff like propping open locked doors? Do they have physical paper of sensitive data? This is especially true with medical offices and doctor offices that still have paper medical records. Are they secure? Are they moving these things around? Is it, left out there where anyone can touch it, or is it put away a little bit? Like I said, I did a lot of doctor offices, and I've seen the whole gamut. I've seen offices that were like fully electronic, no paper, just wonderful. And then there was the ones where they were literally drowning in paper. I'd go in and they would have it like stacked to the rafters, and oh yeah, we had this exam room down the hall that someone crashed a car from the outside, and now we turned it into storage for more records. And like, you got to be kidding me. And of course, with IT stuff, it's just as bad too, where I go in there and there is all their telecom equipment and network equipment right there on the wall where anyone can touch it. No cage around it, whatever. Another office I went to, they had the cage. They had a key in the lock. So, and I talked about, walking around, went to one hospital and they had one of their buildings, they had a mezzanine level that we went to. And we went through this mezzanine kind of hallway area that had been turned into a dumping ground for copiers. A dozen copiers, and then these cardboard boxes full of what looked like x-rays and this sort of stuff. And it's like, what the heck? And then we had also gone into another kind of weird mezzanine level in their building. They had this cage full of equipment, and we're seeing like stackable computers, and it was unlocked. So, we were doing, with that client, we were doing daily meetings with the CIO. So needless to say, that was something that we informed him of that day. And on the meeting with the computer equipment was in the building we were in. He's like, I want to see that. Like, okay. Go down the elevator, go down that stairway here. There you go. See, there's the stack of these equipment. And when we were here, this door was not locked. That's from the fun things of the security assessor walking around and visiting and seeing things and so forth. What also was kind of really weird, I never quite understood this, where in some cases I was going back, working with the same clients several years in a row. So in some cases I'm going back to the same sites, 2 or 3 years in a row, and you hope to see an improvement of things. And in some cases, yes, I did see an improvement, but in some cases I would see like really oddball stuff. Like I went to one place where they had built a closet around their computer equipment, which was nice. But then I open up and it's like, where the heck do these backup tapes come from? These weren't here last year, and you're not doing backup here. Where do these backup tapes come from? And somehow backup tapes just magically appeared where the computers there at that site. I still don't know what the heck happened there. So once it's all done, you know, whether you and with your team or what have you get together, you need to review all that document, make sure you got all the, was there anything still missing? I've had that where we try to ask for all at the beginning, and sometimes not to the very end that we finally get the missing documentation that we asked for. And so is all that been taken care of? Do we have any outstanding questions? Do we have to circle back around and ask something to someone? We then review all our interview notes, everything answered. We know everything, we do all on-site evidence, anything missing. And then typically I start drafting up what we call a corrective action plan of how to address things, what you need to address things. Because at least for me, a lot of the companies I was dealing with were kind of small. They didn't have a huge IT, group and whatnot. And in many cases, that's part of why they brought us on board, was they needed, that sort of security expertise to help them out. So oftentimes, kind of giving them a list of, here's a list of 50 things you need to fix. And they're going to like, it's like, I'd rather say, okay, we found 50 things. Here it is in, order of importance. I've laid out you a plan that you can work out over the next 2 years based upon what I know about your abilities and time and this sort of stuff. They appreciate a lot more when you do it that way. Now, before, there's something that we did, and I don't know if this is true that everyone does this, before we present the final report to the client, we actually would do a review with the client of the draft report. And we would never give them a copy of this. We'd do this, we maybe would go to our office and make a presentation, but it wasn't like, here, take a look at this draft report and give us your feedback. We didn't want them to have that draft report for their protection. Or Zoom call or what have you. And it was meant to like making sure, hey, did we miss anything? Did we misunderstand anything? In one case, I had a client, it was a small private school, and I talked to a lot of different people, and one of the folks I had talked to was their security officer, who mentioned that, not all the students didn't have ID badges, which I was surprised by, because at that point, pretty much most schools gave students ID badges. So I thought that was kind of weird, so I put that down as a finding. And then we doing the review with the client, they're like, oh, no. All our students have ID badges. The security officer was very new to the school. He had just joined in recently, and we're in school break. So I was given incorrect information. So that was good to find that I would have been misinformed, because I would not want somebody to go into the final report, because that was something that I was going to put down as finding. Hey, you should look into giving your students ID badges. Everyone does. Once you do, you will probably give actually multiple reports to clients. This is actually pretty standard. So often this is given to senior manager, i.e. the C-suite. We also will do it as a PowerPoint presentation with a high-level results, because we're giving it to C-level people. Okay, these are not technical people. I can't give them like nitty-gritty, like, oh, you need to do, domain trusts. No. All high-level type stuff. But then I give more detailed reports for the technical folks, because they would understand that. We would also probably do like a more detailed report. In some cases, our clients wanted a letter that said, yes, we come in and assess them against this regulation or that standard, what have you, and these were pretty good. Then yeah, they're compliant. Versus that, not for the ones that were like really. But anyway, that's what it is. At the end, regardless of it's just found, you want a happy client. And most clients, again, they're expecting us to find issues. That's part of why they brought us in there, is that they pretty much think there's issues. They want us to find it. So our job is to find issues. It was kind of a struggle for the really well-run clients, which was like a small handful, to find anything like, hey, here's something that you can improve on. You know, giving them that plan to address it is when they like. And again, since I'm an assessor, not an auditor, I'm a consultant, I can then help that client address those issues. An auditor cannot do that. They're not allowed to. And so hopefully if everything goes well, they'll have us back next year, and the following year, so forth. And hopefully what I like is when I did that is like, oh, they kept getting better and better and better versus, you know, do it 1 year, come back and you're like, oh my God, I'm finding new issues. No, you're backsliding. So let me give you some resources. We're kind of near the end of the time, so I want to get through this and let you guys ask questions. Since there's no one following me, I guess we can go on. So HIPAA, this is probably the best document that I know of, a single document from NIST. I hope you're familiar with the NIST SP 800 series. The first one is a website. It's an independent website run by a guy who is actually a member of the special committee that develops these. It is, in my mind, the best independent site for information on ISO standards. You want to understand what all the different ISO documents do and what they're all about, where they're being updated, that's the place to go. The second one is the official site, which has got some good information, but they don't update as much as they should. And the final one is probably the best book on the ISO. This is the new one. The 8th edition is coming. That I'm looking forward to is it's been updated. It's been updated to the new ISO version. ISO 27001 and 2 was updated last year. Very different. In the cybersecurity framework, obviously the NIST website, they are now in the process of creating NIST 2.0. They're having meetings online and so forth. I've been involved with that. So that's interesting. The risk, RMF, risk management framework, FISMA, whatever you want to call it. That's probably the best site for information out to get us from NIST. And the critical security controls, go to CIS and use all their tools and so forth. SOC 2, the first is the book from AICPA, which is on SOC. You can get it off of Amazon. And also, this is their page at their website on all the SOC reports. PCI site, it's for free. High Trust. I do High Trust. If you can avoid High Trust, please try to. The Trust site, CMMC 2. One is the accreditation board, which is going to be certifying the groups that certify it. And then, of course, the DoD, who actually themselves run some of the documentation. Now, I mentioned a book by Douglas Landau. I actually brought a copy with me, even though I had to put it in my book bag on my flight here. This is the current edition. You get it off of Amazon. Like I said, I wish I had this when I got into this field. This is a really good book. This is the 3rd edition. So if you want to do security risk assessments, this is the one to get. Another one that might be a good resource is another SP 800 document from NIST, Guide for Conducting Risk Assessments. So training, there's not any real training for assessments, but there is some for auditing that I think you should be aware of. ISACA has these 3 certificates, not certifications, for cybersecurity, IT audits, and audit knowledge, which they actually developed with the Cloud Security Alliance. I think it's kind of cool. So these are some things to look at. And those are the books if you want to study. Then, of course, there's the CISA certification, which, yes, I have. The book is a little bit dated. I don't know why they haven't updated that one yet. That's a good certification to get. Be aware, you must have experience to get this one. This is a certification. You must have at least these 4 years with a degree or 5 years doing this sort of work to get the certification. From SANS are these 2 certifications and training. The first one used to be aimed at the critical security control, but they've now broadened it to other frameworks. And then there's the audit one, which I just was informed they've now updated this one recently. And this one does get also into assessments. So So these are, if you want to take the class, it's a in person that's 7 days. The certification is extra and so forth. So I mentioned I'm working on what will be part 2 of this series, creating the audit framework, which was talk about like the setting up of a regular activities, daily, weekly, so forth, to gather evidence that you need for whether, internal audits, external audits, assessments, attestations, what have you, whether it's going to be for SOC, if that was trust, and so forth. I hope it'll be presented at another conference this year. I haven't yet written it. I'm not sure where it'll be given at. I have been thinking recently of maybe a part 3, maybe on security metrics. Because as a candidate, you can't improve what you don't measure. So that's kind of like more up in the air. Based on what feedback I have. At that point, any questions? Yes.
So being in this field for so many years, having a lot of, ask what would be the 3 things you hated about, and if anyone wants to get into this field, any suggestions?
There was clients I was dealing with that was a pain. You had clients that, they might have been themselves and they were difficult, but it worked really great. It was, I guess, the arrogant clients. I don't want to go into a doctor's office and have the doctor tell me like, ew, you don't need a firewall. It doesn't say I have to have a firewall. Please. We had to do my HEPA job. I'm going to tell you your job. Okay. Firewall is a affected element of info security. Yeah. Or, I criticize when the doctor get like piles and piles of papers like, look, I'm a great doctor. All my patients love me. Wonderful. That's not the criticism. You're putting their data at risk by having it just in piles on your desk in the middle of the freaking walkway. So in many cases, I think it was really the clients that were made the job pleasant. The ones that were, they appreciated the work that you did, who were willing to be honest with you and say like, hey, we have issues. We know we have issues. These issues we're aware of, and we can go verify it. And if you can find more, great. That's right.
You had mentioned that you could come into some organizations and they would have zilch for process or something. Do you find that in your professional career, your experience, that being like we're going to add that on as a feature to this assessment? Does that just somehow get?
No, that was in some cases that was understood from the get-go. Is the client knew that they were missing these, and so we were coming in to examine their what they had in place, find out how they're doing it, and develop policy.
Got it. Okay, so you came in knowing we're gonna have to build this from the ground up.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we had any assessment where we came in and just were shocked that they didn't have policy.
Gotcha.
So we did have one client that was almost like that, where they were a big group and this sort of stuff, and it's like we asked for policy, and it's like we're doing the assessments like they have to have policies. They haven't given us the freaking policy. What the heck is going on here? And I literally had come, here, I said it was here in Tampa, and we came here, did a lot of work with them. And as I'm leaving, they finally gave us the policies. So I was sitting in the Tampa airport, Wi-Fi, pulling down the policies, reviewing them before I fly. But it's sort of like, I want those before
right.
A few things, not freaking toward the end. And why? Yes.
If I missed it, I apologize. Have you also been an auditor?
No, I've never been when I was. I was a system administrator, then a security architect. So I was faced by audits. I was in an organization that got assessed for CMM, if you've heard of that. So actually, I experienced what it was like to be assessed, this sort of stuff, and went through several years of that. So I had that experience of being on the receiving end, but I never was part of either an external or internal audit. process. So it basically is me taking my knowledge of what should be in place and then going into another company organization and saying like, okay, because I know what you should have, see if you got it, and going from there. This is when I have a kind of a complaint with in general, IT auditors in general, which is I want to see more people coming into IT audit from a technical background and not a financial background. One time when I was assessing a client and we were talking with the CTO of the company who had set up the whole technical structure of the company, and we're talking to him, and I've got with an associate with me who had been an IT auditor. He's talking about, their structure, and they had, two-way trusts and one-way trusts and all of it. And I'm only like, okay, yeah, because I had been Active Directory administrator, so I understand what he was talking about. And we were done, he left. My associate turned to me, he's like, what he was talking about. And that was no slam on her because she came from a financial background. I came from a technical background. I was sysadmin, I was AD, and I understood that, but when you have people coming from a financial background who don't understand the technology, how really effective can they be to go in and assess the company and say like, your network diagram is good or bad or what have you, when they don't understand what a network diagram should look like.
Well, that's one of the things that's called a job description. IT systems auditor, and then if you had your CPA, great, that's a preferred qualification.
Now, I will be honest, I had met several auditors, auditors who were super sharp on technical stuff. They're out there. But it bothered me too much with these people coming in from the financial side, where I wanted to see people from my background in technical, like coming into IT audits. Yes.
Yeah, so your role as an assessor, would you be on the same line of defense as an auditor, the third line of defense, or would it be second line of defense?
Let's say in a defense level. I mean, in terms of defense, I'm like making sure they're improving their program, making it better. So I'd be, if you think about like the levels of defense in terms of first line